Good evening, and thank you everybody for joining us in what is going to be our second Our Collective Power Speaker Series for the year. Once again, we're focused on making her story. My name is Chris Scott, National Political Director for the Collective PAC. And again, we're focused on making her story, a series that focuses on Black women that are going to be historic first if they were to be elected. So tonight we have none other than the incomparable Deborah Peoples that is in Fort Worth, Texas. If elected, Deborah Peoples would be the first ever Black woman to be mayor of Fort Worth. And if you're not familiar, Fort Worth is the 13th largest city in America. So I am proud to welcome to the stage Deborah Peoples with us tonight.
So, Chris, thank you so much for having me. And let me just tell you, the collective is truly a history maker. Everything you touch turns to gold. So I am looking forward to having the Tashira Jones factor on my race.
Well, look, I promise everybody in the audience, I did not cue her up to say that answer, but Deborah, look, with candidates like you especially make it easy for the type of work that we do. So, look, let's just dive right into it. You made a run in 2019. You came
Yes.
up short. You finished second. As anything is, it's a tough run. It was a hard lesson learned, but I am sure with you coming back for seconds, that you definitely took some lessons out of it. So first, when did you realize that you wanted to make another run for mayor? And then second, what were those lessons that you took away from the first time that you think has you ready to make history this time
Oh, wow. So, Chris, as I am chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party, and in my work as chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party, I have had an opportunity to study all the numbers and to strategize about what we're going to do to elect great Democrats across the county. And I noticed early on in 2017 that we were doing a seismic shift in what was happening in Tarrant County in terms of diversity and in terms of getting the progressive message out. So I knew in 2019 it was going to be a heavy lift, but I felt like you have to have a strategy and a plan. And so my run in 2019 was very intentional. It was against a 4-term incumbent. We were outspent 5-1, but I knew that we had to start the work. And so for all you vegans out there, I have a joke that says, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So 2019 was a precursor to 2021. And so, Chris, just another fun fact for your listeners. When I win, I will be the mayor. Fort Worth will be the largest city in the South led by an African American woman.
around? Well, look, let's stay on the subject
Okay.
history in general.
Yes.
You talked about being chair of the Tarrant County Democratic
Yes.
Party. Tarrant County has been one of those places when you look at Texas, and I think back to my time in 2014 and 2015, especially during the governor's race down there. That is one of the places that is probably one of the last Republican strongholds when you look at the major cities.
It
In
was. It was.
y'all have made major inroads under your leadership as that chair. And when we talk about on a local level, if you become mayor and some of the races that we're even seeing with city council, can you talk a little bit about how monumental that would be just in the general conversation of Texas as a whole, but what it also would mean for Fort Worth at that time to turn that corner?
So I love you for asking that question. Let me just say, it's all about diversity and inclusion. And the way that we were able to expand our electorate base here in Tarrant County is I looked at who had been voting. And then I said, we're leaving votes on the table. We're not getting votes from our Asian American friends. We're not getting votes from our Latinx friends. And we're certainly not getting votes from African Americans. As you know, Chris, African American voters have been the bedrock. We are the backbone of making inroads in the Democratic Party. So we started taking our message on the road. That meant I started knocking on doors, and I tell everybody I can go from the White House down to a dirt road and be comfortable. But we started talking to voters everywhere and telling them what was in it for them. And along the way, we found that many of the issues, once we could get people to articulate what issues were important to them, many of those issues were local issues. And so that is when I said, someone needs to run for mayor. There is much that can be done to improve the lives of people of color if we have progressive leaders who care. And so I will tell you, that's an immediate win for citizens of color and especially African Americans. We have whole areas of the city that have been systemically ignored. And so a lot can be done to focus on underperforming neighborhoods to get them back on track. But more importantly, we have this incredibly diverse city. We actually are a minority majority city, and we need to have boards and commission and a leadership team that looks like us.
So can you expand a little bit for folks? When we think about Texas, you have to think about some of the systematic problems,
Yeah.
especially that you have with race. What does it look like? What is that type of patience and that discipline to make the changes that you guys have been fighting for, not just from a party standpoint, but just from a cultural standpoint, and changing a culture that has not been used to having that type of representation across the board?
So to understand Texas, and many of your listeners may not, Texas was one of those slave owning states. And when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, Texas deliberately, not the news was not slow, they deliberately withheld the news of the Emancipation Proclamation and did not free people of color. And in fact, they coordinated and collaborated with other slave owning states to move their slaves to Texas to make sure that we remained chattel. So now you fast forward, all these years later. And so there was this mentality that Texas was the bedrock of the Confederacy and that we were not, we were going to fight hard to maintain the old ways. In Fort Worth, Texas, one of the largest chapters of the Ku Klux Klan was right here in Fort Worth, Texas. And many of our founding fathers were members of the Ku Klux Klan. So you have this whole kind of umbrella over the city that says white supremacy rules, and we decide when we allow people of color, whether you're black, brown, Asian, to have a say. And so historically, Fort Worth has made a habit of picking our leaders and not listening to the will of the people. So it would be game changing.
So you talk about the will of the people, and I know one of your big platform issues that you campaign on is One Fort Worth.
Yes.
You've served the city by working for city government. You've been a business executive. You're obviously doing a tremendous job as Democratic County Chairwoman. But when you say One Fort Worth, what does that mean? Both to you currently, and then what should it mean, or what do you hope it means to everybody that hears that that's a citizen of Fort Worth?
So I love to give this good example. So when one boat rises, all boats rise. And it doesn't matter the size of your boat. It doesn't matter whether you're a rowboat or a big steam liner or a speedboat. When one boat rises, when we all are rowing in the same direction, all of our boats rise. And so historically, that hasn't always happened. So we've been launching these big steamships and cruise ships, and they've been doing great. But for small businesses and underserved communities, our boats just get stuck in the mud and on the shore. And so I know that sounds like a trite analogy, but the whole image of is when one person wins, we all win. And that's what we have to do. And historically, that has not been the case in Fort Worth. We see many neighborhoods that have suffered from gentrification, poor or no investment in infrastructure or economic development. We also have, I live in zip code 76103, which is adjacent to zip code 76104, that has the dubious honor of being the zip code with the lowest life expectancy in the state of Texas. Poor health care systems, poor health delivery, and that has to change. And so if we want this whole city to thrive, it is in everyone's best interest to make sure that all boats rise and that everybody gets an opportunity to be the recipient of the largesse of this city.
I love that. I love that. So you mentioned healthcare.
Yes.
Obviously, that is definitely when I've done my research on you, working with you as a candidate, that's one of your big platform issues. Next to healthcare, what would you say is the other major issue for you? And then both with healthcare and whatever that second issue is, how do you feel like you want to tackle those issues as a mayor?
So, Krista, I just have to pick one more because there are many. But let me just talk. So, I'm going to put on my economic development hat because, so for those of you who don't know me, I do a lot of social justice work, but I also worked in corporate America for 30 years and retired as a vice president. I understand when you have great economic development, you start to lift people out of poverty. You start to make those boats rise. And so I have talked, and I will tell you, I'm going to connect healthcare and economic development. During this pandemic, in many times in our communities of color, especially here in Fort Worth, the economic engine in our communities has been the small business. It's been the mom and pop business that, Black folks and brown folks and Asian folks go and open. I live in a food desert. We don't have big box stores and so grocery stores. And so the engine that has fueled this community has been the small mom and pop business. And so those are the people who suffered most during COVID. Those are the people who didn't understand how to get the CARES Act from the federal government, who weren't getting support from our city government. Those are the people who were struggling to survive. If we start putting an emphasis on helping those small businesses to grow and to continue to build equity, we're going to see more jobs in our community, better paying wages, those kinds of things. And how does that relate to COVID? Because I just believe we did a poor job especially in Fort Worth, of sounding the alarm on COVID. So many of our communities were hard hit, and we were the first to get COVID and the last to get the vaccine. And that is huge. I mean, that's a huge thing that should not be happening. It should not. I like to tell a story. When I got the link to sign up for the vaccine, I signed up and I began to call everybody I knew that said, gee, have you signed up for the vaccine? And I was entering names and signing people up. When I went, Chris, to take the vaccine, this is a true story. I stood in the line for about 3 hours and it was biting cold with a wind. There were only 8 African Americans, about 300 people, only 8 African Americans. We did not see one person that I could identify as Hispanic. It was just frustrating. And so that's why I tell everybody, we were the ones who needed all the precautions most. We were the essential workers. We were there every day. And yet we were the most at risk and the last to get the vaccine. And under my leadership, you're going to be darn sure that I'm going to making sure that things like that are handled equitably, and we're making sure that all those boats are rising together.
Well, we can't have this conversation about talking about equity, talking about the issues that you just brought up
Uh-huh.
without appreciating the need to have Black women in these
Uh-huh.
spaces. You mentioned earlier Tashara Jones that made history earlier this
Yes.
month in her election for mayor. We know that we look at a U.S. Senate, we don't see a Black woman. We look
Yes.
at a governor, you don't see a Black woman. It's still astounding that you look at so many major cities in America and they've yet to see a Black woman lead the city. Can you talk about just on the looking at legacy and looking at uh, what it means to have a Black woman in this space, what that means to you to beyond just making a run, what it would mean to actually be a Black woman leading such a major city like you would be doing in Fort Worth?
So, Chris, I will tell you, and you and the collective knows this. Representation matters. Having someone at the table to articulate issues that are occurring in our communities is critical. I mean, it is critical. I have been on forum after forum, and I'm not saying anything bad about any of my opponents, but they don't live, they don't have lived experiences that make them understand with a crisis that is facing us. And so I like to talk about a lot about education. We have an independent school district, but the mayor of Fort Worth better be concerned about what is happening in our school systems. Our school systems, the majority of the students, 80% of the students in our school systems are people of color. And so those are the future workers that are coming out. Those are the people that are going to buy homes. Those are the people that are going to run our businesses. And when you come in with a mindset that these are poor performing, poor people, and we got to figure out what to do with them, you're not looking at the potential that is to be gained from engaging all of our citizens. I hear people, and, they talk about, oh, I took a tour of the Black community. I live in the Black community. I know what the issues are. I know what things we need, and I'm prepared to do that from day one. I don't need to do a study on homelessness. I don't need to do a study on education. I don't need to see a study on public safety. I am here from day one. And you talk about public safety. I talked to many people and they said, Fort Worth, Texas didn't used to have racial problems. And I thought, okay, so I don't know where you were, but they agreed, whatever color they are, they agreed that there are racial tensions in this city because of a myriad of things that culminated in the murder of a young woman, a Tatiana Jefferson. I feel the angst and the anguish of our community. And I know that we cannot afford to ignore this. I mean, I come from a family of law enforcement, so I understand public safety, but I also approach this as an African American woman who raised boys in my home. And so I just think it's a game changer because when leadership matters, representation matters, and when you have someone who has lived experiences like mine, we bring all of those to the table, and that helps to shape positive policy.
Well, you queued up my next question so perfectly. Uh, I feel like we're living in this age that you're seeing such more of a value on having
Mhm.
somebody elected that has that real lived experience
Uh-huh.
that can relate to so many different people, but especially the working class people. So for people in Fort Worth, with you having those lived experiences as you just described, what do they have to look forward to on day one from Deborah Peoples' administration?
So I think anybody who knows me. So Chris, I'm holding my famous mug, my mom mug. So I moved to Fort Worth in 1975, and I came here, started to work for the city of Fort Worth. I'm a mom. I'm now a grandmom. But the struggles. I was a single parent. I raised two daughters and sent them to college. So when you're worried about paying bills, I've been there. When you're worried about whether you're going to keep the lights on, I've been there. When you worry about driving while black, that's me. Okay. There are so many things. So I understand, trying to make sure that you were getting paid a living wage. And what does it mean to have decent, affordable housing and live in a community? So I tell everybody, I'm this perfect blend. I had, I got a job, I worked my way up, I became a vice president. So, yes, life became better for me, but it was the struggle along the way to get there. So, I love to tell people I'm this perfect blend of, someone who saw success in the business world and, had some good things happen to me. But I also was the mother who struggled at night to figure out how I was going to send my children to school and keep the lights on and put gas in the car and get to work. And so I am always have worked in community. So I have the corporate experience, the community experience, the lived experience. And what you get is someone who has lived this, who is honed and ready to fight for people, because I want them to have the same positive trajectory on their life that I did.
I've been there. Sounds like amazing campaign slogan. So if you haven't already started putting it on T-shirts, I think that is definitely a winner. When you're talking to the public, like, look, I as your leader, I've been there, so I
Yes.
have the best experience for this.
Yes. Well, so Katan just said something, says, you've been big in talking about your faith being a guiding and grounding force about how you move and work. And so she says, can you tell us a little bit about why it's so important as a leader? And so I think everyone, you have to have something to ground you and to believe in. And so I will just tell you, I tell everybody I'm Catholic, but I'm also Black. And so I was raised in, I would go to a mass in the morning and have to go to a CME church in the afternoon. And so I believe, I understand there are some people who may not, but I do believe there's a higher power, and it has helped in my darkest days. And trust me, there have been dark days. My faith has grounded me and says, there is something that says, be deliberate, be intentional, keep pushing. Better days are coming. And that is one of the things I love about being Black, is that we know that there is a higher power. Now, I tell people all the time, though, God's not going to work out everything for you. God gives you science to get you a COVID vaccine. God gives you, the ability to go to college and learn. God puts all these things in your path, and it's up to you to take advantage of you. But I will tell you, that helped to ground me. It helped me to raise my children, and it helped me to be willing to give back to others, because, one of the things you have to be as a servant leader, and you have to be willing to share your bounty. It's not just about getting it all for yourself. There are people who go, I got mine, now you get yours. That is not the way I was raised. That is not the way I live. It's about to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I always try to live by that credo. And I am so excited, Chris, because my children live by that credo. So I said, I've done something right, because I have raised extraordinary human beings who are giving back.
Well, no, I feel like when we talk about that, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
That was the most common thing I always heard from my parents growing up, and it's something I hope to be able to instill in my son as he gets older and grows up. Can you talk a little bit about? I don't think none of us were expecting. We certainly weren't hoping to still be in a pandemic at this point. Can you talk about what has been the challenge? Obviously, the first time around, you're able to be more in person, but what has been a challenge in campaigning in a pandemic, and how do you feel like your campaign has been able to overcome some of those challenges to still connect to the voters and get your message through?
So it's not just a challenge for me, Chris. It's a challenge for everybody. We're a people that enjoy being with each other. We like to touch, we like to feel. Many of us learn that way. We're not, we don't always, we're not always visual learners. We're auditory learners. We like to touch people. And so that has been, that started being a challenge. But I will tell you, having worked with the Democratic Party in the November election, I just made a decision to get out there and knock on doors for now Vice President Harris. But I did it strategically. I wore my mask. I had gloves. We were social distancing. I'd knock on a door and then step back to talk to people. So I had already worked out a system for myself on how to get out and campaign. And then I will tell you, believe it or not, Zoom and programs like this helped us to extend our rate and reach. And so I started doing something early on Tuesday evenings at 6 o'clock called the Tuesday Talk. And we've had thousands of people listen to those. And I talk about topics, current events, topics that are happening. And it allowed me to meet a lot more people and to get issues out. And so it's been a combination of being out and but also using the internet wisely and using it effectively. Listen, I just did a TikTok.
Get out. So you're definitely gonna have to send me that TikTok, and there's a chance we might even repost it on our social media.
I'll have to do that. So, I am learning. And so this is the thing. Never stop learning. I tell everybody, you see the gray hair, but I never stop learning. As a business executive, I learned that if you stop learning and if you don't want to change, you will get left behind. So I pride myself on trying to keep up with things. And while I'm not the best on Instagram, I am on Instagram. I do tweet. And so I've had a lot of fun with learning how to do things on TikTok.
So look, let's switch things up for a little bit.
Okay.
We're gonna have a few fun questions before we get back to the home stretch of things.
Okay.
So if you weren't campaigning right now, what would be your favorite thing to binge watch either on TV, Netflix, anything? Or if you don't do TV, what would be your favorite books to be reading through?
Oh, I love whodunit. So any good murder mystery, I'm there. Okay, I'm a murder mystery buff. I'm also an avid reader, and I read anything I can get my hands on. So I tell people I am a jack of all trades and a master of none. I can probably tell you a little bit about anything, but don't ever say that I'm an expert on it.
I love it. What's the song that always energizes you whenever you hear it?
Oh, I love women empowerment songs. So I love This Girl Is on Fire. So, I mean,
I knew that was coming.
I love Beyonce, anything. I love empowerment songs. Now, how I settle down is I like some nice smooth jazz, but I'm a mover. So give me something with a beat to it and I'm gone.
Okay. So I gotta ask this because we all remember like when you're in second grade and you have this essay of like when I grow up, what did you actually want to be when you grew up? Did you always imagine, look, I'm gonna do the executive thing and maybe go into politics later, or was it something completely different at that time?
So let me tell you, I was very lucky growing up. So I probably, when I was in the second grade, said I wanted to be president. So Chris, you need to understand, I came from a really amazing family. And so
Mhm.
we always were told our history. It was a verbal history, but we always knew about our family. We got told our family lived in a small East Texas town. There were 12. My grandfather had 11 brothers and sisters. They were run off their land in the middle of the night. Somebody came and said, they're coming for your land. They're going to kill you. You need to go. And they scattered all over the country. I have an uncle, a great uncle, who read law and was involved in Sweat versus Painter with Thurgood Marshall. controversial. So I came from a family. I'm getting ready to celebrate the matriarch of our family's 100th birthday, Eva Macmillan. They were all engaged in civil rights and social justice. And so I knew early on that the expectation was for us to give back. So I probably said I wanted to be president. I
Okay.
was ambitious even then. So I've kind of pulled it back some.
Look, no, I love that. Well, but you gave us a little bit of preview. Can you talk about growing up in that lifestyle where you were surrounded so much with civil rights and social justice? Just the immediate impact as you were moving up in the workforce, how much of an impact that had on your life?
So it made me who I am. So let me tell you, my grandfather ended up in West Texas. Much of the family was on their way to Arizona and California. We went west when we left there. He was a barber and ended up in Odessa, Texas. And so when we were on our way to California and we stopped because my granddad got sick and we ended up staying in Odessa. We lived, and now after I grew up, it was a blue collar neighborhood, working class neighborhood, but it was a neighborhood where there were blacks and browns and whites. I mean, it was a mixed working class neighborhood, but we were all poor and we didn't know it. So it was that whole, segregation, push them all to one side of town. And I tell people right behind us, we were the next to the last street in town, and behind us there was a chemical plant. Now when they lit up the chemical plant at night, and if we thought it was all beautiful, it was all these lights, and we said it's New York City. Well, I tell everybody it's a wonder I don't glow now, because that was environmental racism. That was the first time that I was on the receiving end of environmental racism. But my mother and father always believed that education was a way out, but they talked to us about our history, and they were sort of like the Sankofa bird. You don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've come from. So they made sure that we were well versed in history and what it meant to us. And then growing up in that neighborhood, it also taught me tolerance. My two younger brothers are Mexican American. Their mother could not raise them. My mother said they come stay with us. My oldest brother was African American. His mother died, so there were 6 natural kids, and then my mother raised 3 other boys. So we were a family of 9. And my mother I said she was ahead of her time, because she always preached tolerance and learning other cultures and learning about other people. And so although I understand the journey of the African American, I also understand the journey of the Mexican American and the poor white American. And so, and different religions. And that is what I've tried to tell people. We are a lot more alike than we are different. And so we have to focus on those things that bring us all together. And that's why I'm running for mayor, because I think I have a unique ability to bring groups together, to build collaboration, and to ensure that the least of us are getting the attention that we need.
Well, once again, we get brought back to that theme of one Fort Worth
Yes.
and how you're campaigning.
Yes.
So going a little bit deeper, talking again, when you're connecting with these voters, we've talked about healthcare some, we've talked about economics, we talked about education. Is there any other thing that really is near and dear to your heart that you really want a chance to work on if given a chance to be mayor of Fort Worth?
Okay, so good. I'm going to talk about something in a minute, but I just noticed in the chat it says, "What's your favorite cool snack during the Texas summer?" So I'm sorry, it's watermelon. It is. I'm an avid gardener. I'm a gardener, and I'm also a beekeeper, and that is so. I grew up, with a family. We raised a lot of the things that we raised a lot of the food that we ate, and so I tell everybody, that is how I get back in touch. I center myself is I work in the garden, and then I have bees, because I know that if we don't have honeybees, we're not going to make it. We're not going to exist as human beings. But so let me just tell you, one of my big things, one of my giant things is transportation. And so one of the things that has happened here is that, and you see it in many cities, it's just not in Fort Worth, but we are relegated, people of color are relegated to certain sections of town. And so by and large, many of us live in certain communities. And I made a conscious effort to move back to my community on the east side. And when I retired, people said, oh, you don't need to live there. You know, you don't want to live in the east side. And I said, yes, I do, because I need to understand, I need to be part of the community so I can articulate these issues. So that's why I talked about, I live in a food desert. I'm lucky because I get to get in a car and drive to go buy groceries. But there are many people who don't have cars, and they have to rely on public transportation. Our public transportation is dismal. It is. We have the city bus, and of course, everybody has stigmatized the city bus. And so a lot of people don't want to ride it. And so we have to change the image, but we also have to start building a world-class transportation system. We have to be able to get people from their homes to jobs, because jobs are a great equalizer. We have to be able to get, people from their jobs to homes. And so I spend a lot of time talking about great cities have great transportation systems. If we're going to be, we say we're the 13th, soon to be the 12th largest city in the country, we need a great transportation system, because we got to get jobs here, but we have to be able to get our citizens to these well-paying jobs that pay a living wage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like, again, both healthcare and transportation, if we're looking at
Economic
even
development. Yeah.
economic development, if we're looking at the first 100 days, it sounds like we got a couple of tidbits of what the first 100 days
Yes.
under Deborah Peoples could look like. So look, how can people help you if they want to get involved, if they want to support you? How can they support your candidacy for mayor?
Okay, so let me just say, I'll be real frank. So number one, I want you to volunteer. I want you to volunteer. But number two, this is one of the hardest things for us as African Americans, is we have to start learning to give to campaigns. And so that is one of the things I do, even if I don't have but $5 or $10, go in and give money to people. I'd go into Reverend Warnock's campaign, and if on that day I was a $25 lady, because I was giving to different campaigns. And so I will tell you, $5 helps. It buys a yard sign. We just sent out, 500 thank you notes today, and they need 55-cent stamps. And so one of the ways that we get our message out is that we, I tell people, please consider giving. We always knew, Chris, that this would be African American women have the hardest time raising money of any candidate in the country. Not Black men, not white women, but Black women struggle to raise money and to get our message out. And so I knew going into this that I was going to be outspent. And we knew that. And so we planned the campaign based on a lot of grassroots activism, but we also knew that we needed to be able to get our message out, whether it was by mail or social media. You can only, in a city of 1 million people, you can only knock on so many doors in the prescribed amount of time. So we really wanted to get our message out. So I am, and if somebody will drop it in the chat, I am Deborah, DEBORAH, Peoples, PEOPLES, FOR, mayor.com. And I'm telling you, no donation is too small, and there is no donation that I do not acknowledge, because I understand that, we are doing this. But that's why I love the collective. We have to make people believe that it's possible, but we also need to know that we've got to have a giving heart, and we've got to start supporting some of our candidates, because it's doable. And the last thing I'm going to tell you, I got spent in 2019, I got outspent 5-1. I got 42.8% of the vote. And I tell people after it was over, people were coming up to me saying, we could have won this one. We should have won this one. We could have won this one. And I said, but we didn't have the money to do it. We didn't have the money to get our message out. So today, had we been able to get the money to get our message out, you might be talking to the mayor of the city of Fort Worth, Texas. So, I will tell you, that's the hardest thing for candidates to do, is to ask for dollars. But I've been doing it so long, Chris, I will tell you, whatever you can donate helps.
Well, look, let's make sure, if you're listening, let's make sure that money is not an issue this time. You've
Yes.
been running an amazing campaign. So again, go to DeborahPeoplesForMayor.com. Even if it's $1, make sure that you give this so we can help Deborah make history. So one last question before I let you go.
Okay.
Uh, for anybody in the audience that's listening, especially any Black girls, Black women, that are aspiring to do more in politics and work their way up, what piece of advice would you offer them?
Oh, so find something you love. And so I tell everybody, everything is political. You can talk to me all day long and I can tie it back to politics. And so, I'd say find something you love. If you love to dance, okay, get involved in dance, because guess what? Dance are connected to the arts. The federal government has programs that regulate the arts. You can get money for the arts. If you like music and you're a rapper and you want to do those things, do them and do them well, and you will understand that your industry is regulated, and it goes back to politics. So that's the first thing. Find something you love, and then the next thing, get involved, get engaged, volunteer. And I promise you, the more you get involved and engaged in community, you will start to see the rewards. And so I tell everybody, if you're young and you're thinking about running for office, get involved now and get engaged. Start getting your name out there. Start doing things for all the right reasons, and people will know. And that's another reason, Chris, that I'm running. For all those extraordinary young women who have been told that they can't, for all those young women who've been told that they need to wait, for all, and it's not just young women, it's for all of these amazing, extraordinary people of color who feel like it's not our time. Yes, it is, but we have to be willing to get out there and risk something.
Come on now, take us home to church. Look, if folks were taken away anyway, if there were some cliff notes that I'm gonna give folks from Deborah Peoples tonight, it's be intentional, to get involved,
Yes.
find something that you're passionate about and pursue it. And overall, Deborah, just thank you so much for taking some time to sit down with us. You gave us a history lesson on both where Fort Worth has been, but where it can actually head under your administration. It's been such a pleasure to work with you so far. Definitely looking forward to helping elect you as the first ever Black woman to be mayor of Fort Worth, and just incredibly looking forward to what you're going to do in the future. So thank you
Well,
so much.
Chris, I thank the collective for believing, because it's critical that someone has to believe in us and somebody has to have our back. And so hats off to the collective. And I tell everybody, when you go onto my website, if you want to send me a note, I answer all notes. So send me things. Tell me your story, because you're the person that I'm out there fighting for.
Perfect. Well, Deborah, thank you so much again. That's going to conclude our program for the night. We will join you all again in May for our third installment of Our Collective Power. But thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. And if you're in the Fort Worth area, make sure that you get out and vote for Deborah Peoples for mayor on May 1st.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.